Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to this week's recap video. This one, I'm not sure, it might be a little bit shorter than normal because I know we're already down one video because we skipped posting Monday because the garden center window project has become kind of consuming. We're almost done, but every step seems to just take, you paint something, you have to let it dry. You have to paint it again, then you have to let it dry, and then So it's just been kind of one of those weeks. And then we're actually shooting this video a day before we normally do. So we're just down tomorrow's video as well. So next week's recap might be a little bit longer. It's just the way our schedule worked out this week. But you did gather more questions than normal, right?
Yeah, I got a few more questions for each video.
Okay, so it might be the same length anyway. The first video from this past week was planting up all the pots in front of the greenhouse. And I had a really good idea of what I had on hand because I had just finished organizing the whole greenhouse and moving everything around, and I had plenty of things left over from fall projects to deck out those containers, and it was really fun. I used Hookeras and snapdragons, hypericum that was beautiful, kale, there were some grasses in there, boxwoods, a lot of different things, and they look really pretty. I really am enjoying them so far. The top comment was from the Plantastic Nerd. It feels so weird that a gardening YouTube channel from the other end of the world has become my daily dose of planting content. Here I'm always watching your videos on my lunch break. I live in Germany, literally enjoying my free time with you, which is awesome. I thank you for that. Your videos and the community you created is just so delightful. It feels like we all know each other. Thank you. And it is. We have such a delight. That's such a great way to describe all of you guys. It is a delightful community for sure. P.S. You mentioned your uploading schedule in your last recap video, and I have to say it totally fits my daily routine. Even if we were to witness an argument between you two, I don't think it would change anything. I don't know. It might change something. We talked about how I think it's your worst fear, Aaron, that one of our arguments gets aired.
Yeah.
Like not edited out.
Or maybe even like a misunderstanding, like, whenever you say something that I know is like true or correct and I'm wrong and I don't want to hear it, I'll say something like, oh, you shut your mouth. And like, I'm playing, and that's just my way of...
See what I have to put up with. Okay, moving on to the next question. Flame King, where can I purchase the metal art on top of the planters? So I'm guessing there's only one in that video. I think that sphere-shaped topiary form. I used that first in a video, 4 years ago or so. I can't even remember how long ago. After that, we did find it online. It was out of stock, and I think it was out of stock for a really long time. And then I noticed somebody had posted that it was back in stock, and I don't remember what brand it was or where you can find it. I think it's going to be just something where you have to poke around online, and that's what I'd have to do. Sphere topiary. And start looking around. Metal sphere topiary, yes. Aurelia said, where do you get all your urns and cement planters? I get most of mine, a couple of different sources, most from Unique Stone and then also from Henry Studio is another place. Most of mine, though, are from Unique Stone, and I really love them. They're just so beautiful. Best thing you can do for both of those, because they're both like wholesale companies, go onto their website and you can type in your zip code, and then they will kind of connect you with the retailer that's closest to you where their things are sold. But you can just spend a bunch of time like perusing their catalog online. It's fun. That's like one of my favorite things to do, is look at like dahlias and tulips and cement planters and fountains online and just dream about what I could do with them all. Fun. Joanna said, what temps can ornamental, kale, or cabbage tolerate until they no longer look pretty? I'm not familiar. Pretty darn cold, really. The more protected they are, the better. Where I put them in front of the greenhouse, they are semi-protected because there's the arb hedge. They're right on the south side of the greenhouse, so they're going to absorb some heat there. Better if they're like the ones in my kitchen window box. They're underneath an overhang. They're protected all the time. They don't get the wind right there, and they don't get frost because they've got an overhang for the most part. Those will last all the way through the winter. The ones that are a little more exposed, it depends. It just depends. Most of the time, ours make it through the winter and look pretty decent in the spring, and we're a zone 6. Housewarming said, maybe I'm weak, but is there a better way to open and pour soil from bags? It feels so floppy and hard to manage with spilling soil everywhere. There's really not a great way. I do like, though, with the bags, we use the Espoma soil, and I feel like you can, if you grab it right, which I don't always grab it right, but if you do, you can just tear that top off pretty easy. But I always have to make sure to what is it, like break the soil up inside the bag before I open it to where all of it's kind of at the bottom instead of in a, when they're stacked in or stored in piles, they're kind of more solid, like a solid rectangular chunk. You want to just kind of break them up so all that soil is at the bottom, and that makes it a lot easier to manage.
It is nice. You can get, for example, like the espoma soil, you can get it in 1 or 2 cubic foot bags, and they even do it in like quart size bags, don't they? Like 16 quart, or is that right?
Or 16 or 32.
I don't know.
I don't either.
But they do it in a smaller than a 1 cubic foot, which is more like, it would take a lot of those bags to fill up a large, pot.
I only use 1 cubic foot bags though now.
Yeah, those are pretty easy to manage.
Yeah, I got to a point, I used to always get 2 cubic foot because usually they're a little bit cheaper to buy them in the 2s instead of the 1s. But I got to a point where I just thought, I don't want to be lifting these 2 cubic foot bags of soil all over the place all the time. I think that in the long run, I might pay for that. So the 1 cubic foot bags have been really nice. Easier to manage, for sure. Sweet Mommy of 5 said, since you gave us a little peek of the Arborvitaes, could you please give us an update on them? How much have they grown? Have you replaced any? And will you always keep them on constant water drip? They have grown a lot. Do you think they've doubled?
Yeah, they've doubled in size. We gave an update earlier in the season. It was that video about fails for the year where we pulled some of them out in a row.
Right.
Otherwise, along the west side, we haven't replaced any of them. They look great.
The one, right? Or just the one?
There were 2 early on that we replaced.
Like the second season?
Yeah, it was like right after the first season, and it was just kind of like there was no good reason for why the ones died that were in that spot. Like it could have been a gopher chewing on the roots or something maybe out of our control. But we replaced them, that next year, and then they just look pretty much the same as the other ones. And then the new ones that we planted on the new property. We planted a lot of them, like 90 or something like that, or more.
I don't know that I've actually counted.
I haven't either, but I want to say there's like 5 of them that look like they're really struggling. And we noticed that there were some that struggled the first year. Well, we planted them when it was over 100 degrees. Yeah. That was dumb. But
hard pan too. Some of those holes were hard to dig.
So we may have about 5 or so to replace, which even then, we planted around 100 out there. And so a 5%, loss, even then a lot of people would tell you that's pretty good. I think if you're over 90%, most people, well, especially in this area with such a harsh climate, if you're above 90%, most people would be pretty happy with that. Yeah.
And the ones behind the barn, it's weird because none of our other ones have done what they did. There was something wrong there.
Yeah.
It was either the water or, a lot of you guys suggested that it might be because our neighbors moved there, and they moved their shed down at our request, actually. They moved both of their sheds to where they're both hidden behind our greenhouse and barn. And so many of you suggested that it was the heat off of that siding of the shed that maybe created that baking effect on them, but they started doing that the year before and the shed was not there. So that's what makes me think, well, maybe they had something wrong water-wise and then that just finished them off. It could have been multiple
like a
different
combination of things.
Yeah, I think it had to have been a water or a spray thing the year before that made them start looking horrible. Yeah. We checked the water though. That's the weird thing. That's why I thought, well, maybe they got sprayed with the wrong thing. It's supposed to be spinosad and maybe it was an herbicide. It's possible. And because they all started doing the exact same thing, and then the next year, the extra sun on them. Yeah, so anyway, largely though, super happy with how those have done, and I cannot wait. I think just even one more season, and these up here closer to the house will be a wall, and then the ones out on the west side, I cannot wait for them to put on some growth.
Yeah,
that's going to be
really
awesome. Nice. Marty said, a question about Hookera. I thought they were perennial, but they only seem to last maybe 2 years. In my garden, they just get smaller. What am I doing wrong? I've noticed that there are some varieties that are stronger than others. My dad even says, he treats them as an annual. That's what he's got very definite opinions about stuff.
He does. Well, he's also been around the block too.
Yeah, Arborvitaes, he said, he calls them a plant looking for a reason to die.
Yeah.
When we were putting in all of our arbs, he was like, you guys are going to be sorry.
Well, your dad's philosophy is that he doesn't want to baby plants.
No, it's true.
And so there are some, remember our neighbor wanted to plant, was that a fir tree?
Yes.
Something like that. And he babied it. It still looks like, that was 10 years ago now. Yeah. It still looks bad.
It's had to be topped.
But it's still alive,
Yeah.
And so you can make some things live here if you baby it.
He had to spray it down with a hose 3 times a day. He was a retired man who would go outside with his hose and spray the tree down.
If you like to do that and that's your hobby, you can do that. But your dad is like the opposite end of the spectrum. He wants something that's like...
He doesn't even like hydrangeas. And you know how many hydrangeas our garden has?
Yeah.
And our hydrangeas do really well. And I keep telling him, all you have to do is give them the right amount of water and you can have hydrangeas that are beautiful. And he's like, meh.
Yeah.
So hookeras are kind of the same thing for them. In fact, I think the only hookeras they have might be the ones that I've planted for them. And they're doing great. Cherry truffles. Peachberry ice has been a good one at returning for me. Spearmint has been great. Black pearl has been pretty good. So I've had some good luck with those recently. I think too it has to do with the moisture level during the winter and just how your winters are. I've noticed that I asked about it actually once because they create those long stalks sometimes, and a lot of times it's because they're too wet. And so that's the answer I was given, is that they're being kept too wet, and maybe that's what's creating that little trunk problem. And you can cut those off and replant them, or dig the whole plant up and sink it down lower into the ground. But I think it's trial and error on where you're putting them, also depending on your zone. So a lot of them are rated like zone 5 through 9, maybe, like as an example. When you get lower on the zone scale, like down towards zone 5, where they say hookeras are kind of like a semi-evergreen or an evergreen plant, in the lower zones, they typically don't behave that way, and they're one that you really have to either cut back or clean up heavily in the spring. In the more mild climates, so on the higher end of the zone that they're listed at, they'll look a lot better throughout the winter. So it's just one of those things. You got to find varieties, and sometimes it means trying some and failing, finding varieties that really like your space. I wish I had better answers to some of these things. But so much of gardening is so dependent on so many different factors, and everybody's are different. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. Benjamin said, I meant to ask in your previous video, how come you keep your John Deere riding mower outside? That's your question, Aaron. Not now.
Was that the old mower that was visible?
Probably, yeah.
That was the old one, which I just sold. I bought a new one with a bigger deck, and it's pretty fancy. It has all-wheel steer, which means that the back wheels turn as well. It's not a lot of people like the zero turns, but I kind of find them to be it feels like a little bit more work on a zero turn.
How so?
I don't know if it's kind of hard to describe. It's like when you're on a lawn tractor, it feels more chill. Like you're just kind of out there. Like if you want to get something done fast, go with the zero turn. They go really fast, lots of horsepower. I don't know. I just like the lawn tractors better.
Everybody has their thing. Next video was planting roses in a peony, better late than never. So I had 8 roses that had been sitting in their peat pot since last spring, and they could have just as easily been sitting through this winter in their peat pots. And I thought, nope. When I organized the greenhouse, I put those plants in a pile, and I thought, like, this is next. This is the next thing I need to do, is get these things planted. And I'm so glad I did. I think they'll be a lot happier. And then it's been so nice, really. Like, it is so warm. I brought a blanket out here with me and coffee because I thought that I was going to be chilly, because the mornings have been chilly, but it is so warm in here right now, like summertime almost temperatures. Anyway, all that said, I think that it's been warm enough to get plants still in the ground and have them have a chance to kind of get settled a bit before it gets really cold. If it's going to, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Janine said, Laura, I'm a critical care nurse. To say the past almost 2 years have been challenging is beyond an understatement. But a little over a year ago, I found your channel. I have always had a passion for gardening passed down from my grandmother. She taught me lots, but you ignited a fire in me that I haven't felt in a very long time. Because of you, I found my joy of gardening again at a much needed time. Your videos and gardening have become my therapy. For that, I say an incredibly heartfelt thank you. And thank you for everything that you've done through this whole last couple of years. That's amazing, and it's always encouraging to see comments like that. I think that was the top comment on that video. Ray said, just wondering about the raised gardens. What do you do to get them ready for winter? Not a whole lot. The raised beds, sometimes I will put soil heat cables in there and grow some fall crops or winter crops. I'm not really as concerned about doing that because I'm going to do some experimenting inside the heated greenhouse this winter, and I still have pretty incredible fall crops out in the cut flower garden still. I've got Swiss chard looking great, beets, carrots, cilantro, spinach, lettuce, radishes, kale, still going strong out there, and peas. The drip system, though, that runs to each one of those raised beds has been drained. So there's no more water to the raised beds. The garlic is already up. And if we have like a really long dry spell in the winter, I'll go with a watering can and just give them a little bit of extra water. But other than that, I don't really worry about them until spring. Christina said, have you had any trouble with gophers, or have they moved on to other parts of the neighborhood? I think, and I don't know, Aaron, maybe you've seen more, but I think I've only seen one mound this year.
Yeah,
It's because Gary, our neighbor, he's like on it. He traps them for us. He grew up farming, and he always tells me, just text me when you see a mound and I'll be out there. The first year we owned this property, he came over like twice a day. You'd see his four-wheeler out there, and he was out there with a shovel just like taking after. Like, he really enjoyed helping us out with that, and it was a huge, huge help to us, because when they trenched around the property for water and electrical, the guys operating the trencher, or it was like a excavator or backhoe or something like that they were using. They said that as they were digging it, gophers were just falling down into the trench out of their runs and running down the trench. They said it was kind of creepy to watch. They were like taking videos with their phones.
They've pretty much moved on, though.
They have, yeah, which I'm sorry to our neighbors. Because, I mean, they had to move somewhere. I think Gary trapped a lot of them between that and then us actually getting some things done out here, and a lot of equipment being out here. They've moved on. Joshua's Garden said, what is the small evergreen in the center of the flower bed at 1337? Oh, Aaron included a screenshot. Thank you, Aaron. I would have had to go and find that. That is an Oregon green Austrian pine. It's a zone 4 through 8, grows about, 20-25 feet tall, 15 feet wide. So it's going to be a pretty good sized pine out there, and it's so cute right now. I think it needs some Christmas lights. Are you going to Christmas light any of the trees out there, like in the corners? Have you thought about that yet?
Yeah, I'd like to.
I think that'd be cute.
It just depends. Lights are harder to get a hold of this year.
Are they?
Yeah, it seems like everybody around here, like, prices have gone up and their stock isn't as good. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just our area. I don't know.
I don't know. I think I've heard that the supply chain is kind of hard this year anyway.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll just draw from what we have. It would be really fun to put the big colorful lights as a fly right on the lens. I don't know if you guys probably see that. And is it gonna crawl into the middle? There it goes. What a pain. I'm not long enough to reach it.
I don't see anything on the lens.
You don't see, it's like crawling right across the lens. Anyway, I think it would be cute to put like the big colorful lights on the blue spruces out there.
Yeah.
I did buy some for 2 of them, because remember I used those 2 up for Christmas decorations up here. Mm-hmm. So we probably got enough to do at least those 3 and maybe something else. I don't know.
I really want to do the lights along the trees on the lane, the autumn blaze, but I think this year we're going to have to skip it again, because there's not enough for the lights to hold on to.
Right.
I don't think those put on hardly any growth this year, which is fine. They're probably working on roots.
Yeah.
But
Kelly said, isn't it too late in the season to add fertilizer? I heard you should not fertilize outside of the growing season. Do you expect your peony to bloom next spring? None of my peonies bloomed this past spring. I do believe my peony will bloom this next spring. It bloomed in its container, so and it's a healthy plant, so I do think it will. The fertilizer that I use is specifically formulated for root development, which the roots, even though slower during the wintertime, they're still active underneath the soil surface. So, and the plant's not going to be utilizing a ton of that fertilizer, but there's not a ton of moisture that's going to happen either, typically. So that fertilizer will stay in there. The plant will utilize a little bit of it, especially right now while it's still so warm out. And then it'll just kind of hang out there and be ready in the spring for the plant to start using it and taking it up. It's not a type of fertilizer that's there to promote a bunch of foliar growth or blooms or anything like that. It's specifically for roots, so I still use it this time of year. Michelle said, any knowledge I have of gardening is a direct result of watching your channel. Thank you for that. Question, I try to use biotone starter fertilizer every time I plant something new, but I often conveniently remember to use it right after I planted it and just end up adding it just above the root ball. Is this good or just as good, or should I dig it up? I think you're fine. I've done that as well. If you can kind of scratch it a little bit lower so that the roots have access to it quicker, that's great, but it will eventually make its way down in there. By watering it and that sort of thing, that fertilizer will make it down. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
I think the point with the biotone starter is that it's got the mycorrhizae in it, which needs to come in contact with the roots in order to get its full effect.
Right.
So that's the whole point with putting it at the bottom, the base of the hole is the roots start growing, they come in contact with the mycorrhizae, and then What is it? They create like a bunch of nodes.
They create openings, more openings in the roots.
for nutrients to enter.
Right.
So it's basically like instead of having a plant that has like 100 mouths, where nutrients get in, it's like 1,000 mouths or 1,000,000.
So like if your root, this is your root, there's an opening at the bottom for the root to take stuff up, but the mycorrhizae come along and attach themselves and create a bunch of openings along the root instead of just the end. So it does help that way. But I mean, if you were in that position and you had already planted something, Aaron, you wouldn't dig it up and put the biotone in.
No, because I think you'd risk more damage by trying to dig it up.
Yeah. Just try to remember if you can. Dennis said, I'm completely addicted to watching this channel. I have a problem with the new episodes no longer appearing automatically in my feed. I tried unsubscribing and then subscribing anew, no luck. Any ideas?
I think that's just a chronic YouTube problem or Facebook problem, honestly, wherever you're at. I mean, in the beginning you subscribed and then you got notifications when somebody uploaded a video, but then YouTube said, well, now you got to ring the bell. Subscribing isn't enough. So then you start ringing the bell, but then even that's not enough. Now you have to subscribe, hit the little bell icon, and then you have to hit the drop down that says notify me of all new videos.
Oh.
And then there's another option I think that says like notify me of some videos or something like that. YouTube just keeps making it more and more difficult. And then to top it all off, it seems like it's buggy no matter what. So even if you've done everything correct, you still sometimes won't get the notifications. And
I didn't know about that third step. I mean, I knew about subscribe and the bell, but I didn't know there was a drop down.
And I guarantee you, another year from now, they'll add like a fourth step or change it all together. And it's like they keep, and YouTube does have a really good algorithm to show people videos of what it thinks that they want. And they have all the data to back up how long people spend on the website. And so their recommended is pretty good, but sometimes people also want to have some control over what they're watching, like garden answer videos or whatever. And so
Appreciate you trying though. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. Just trying out something new, see if it will work. Kathy said, I heard that ants are attracted to peonies. Is that true? I think they're beautiful, but stayed away from them in my gardens because of that. I think they are, like on the buds, they create that kind of sap stuff, the dew. I don't know a lot about it.
It's totally normal, right, for the ants to crawl over
there's no problem with it. And I think it's a myth that the ants actually help open the bloom. I don't think that that's a thing. I think I read that once. Again, I'm not a peony expert, but ants are attracted to sweet things. And so if the plant's creating something like that, the ants will come and then they go away once the buds are all done. Dorothy said, wondering how your biodegradable plastic pots did this year. Did I miss the update? Probably missed the update. I did try them out. I had tomatoes and dahlias planted in mine. And so I started the dahlias February-ish, and I planted those out. I actually had to take them out of those containers to rinse their roots and cut the tops off because all the dahlia seedlings I had got spider mites. So I decided instead of trying to spray them, I just cut the tops off, and they had created so I planted the dahlias from seed, and then they created these little itty bitty tubers. They're so cute. I took pictures of them. And I replanted them, and they were blooming. Like up to last week, they were blooming outside of our fence. I need to get those dug up here pretty soon. But anyway, about the pots, they hadn't really started to fall apart for me. Now, we are a super dry climate. I don't know that we're like the best example.
But you were watering the plants in the pots.
Yeah, daily water.
So they were still coming in contact with just as much water as anybody else's climate.
Maybe, but there's no humidity in the air, and I don't know how much that is a factor. Maybe it's not. And I do know that Proven Winners is rolling out biodegradable pots for their annuals so that you can buy them in these pots that will fall apart in the ground and turn into soil eventually.
Just a caveat, I believe that there's only maybe 2 growers that are doing the pots.
Sorry, I'm checking my mic just to make sure.
I don't think they're not like rolling it out nationwide. I think the hope is to roll it out nationwide, somewhere.
In an effort to cut down on their plastic, Well, you have to start somewhere, and you have to see if
I think they're starting at home. I think I want to say 4-Star Greenhouse, which is one of the owners of Proven Winners. So, and then maybe Garden Crossings is doing it as well.
So the hope is, and this is awesome. So when you plant a lot of annuals, it's just an extra step, and the pot. You then have the pot in the end. But to take the plant out of the pot and put it in the ground, if you can get them in biodegradable pots, then you can just pop the whole thing, the hole, pop the whole thing in the hole, and you're done.
And you don't have any plastic.
Yeah, there's no waste, which is awesome. So it's really fun to see, like, strides being made in that direction, and hopefully it goes really well. And I'm going to be trying out those pots again. So like I said, I didn't notice any degrading of mine happening, but I'm going to try them again this year. I do have some on hand.
I think what we should do is we should try it to its like fulfillment.
You did ask me. You said, now, did you plant them in the pots though? And I was like, no, I took it because I had to take the dahlias out of the pots.
I feel like that's not really testing it.
I know. I need to start tomatoes and then plant, like take one of the tomatoes out of the pot, I guess, and leave one in the pot and plant them both.
Right.
And just see what happens.
Or if you can get an annual too, like if you can actually get an annual in the pot. I feel like doing it on a small scale, just planting a few.
It's so painful to me to think about like.
What if it died?
Yeah, like all those trials and stuff, trials of fertilizers and stuff. I'm like, well, I want my plant to do the best, so I'm going to just do what I in my brain think is tried and true, which may not be the best.
Yeah.
You can learn new things from this. I need to repeat that to myself. Like, it's good for research. Next video is 1,600 more bulbs planted, tulips and summer snowflakes, and that was my last big bulb push. I do have a few still to plant in containers, and then also the ones to go around the cut flower shed to plant, but that feels like nothing compared to what was staring at me in the beginning, so I was happy to get that project done. Stephanie said, I think when you do your spring garden tour, you're going to break the internet. I'm so excited to see the display. All the hard work will absolutely pay off with hundreds of beautiful flowers for years to come. I am so excited to see what it's going to look like, and I feel like it's going to fuel my next year's order. When I see them blooming, that's usually the time I start looking on Color Blend's website and I start planning, like, okay, I see this hole right here, I could use some color here, I could use some color here, you know, that sort of thing. It's a great time to plan what to do the next year, and I feel like it's going to be it's going to be fun. I'm excited. Heart Alive Today said, are planting augers interchangeable with all drill brands, or do they only work with DeWalt? They're interchangeable, but you want to use a non...
you need a powerful enough drill, but they'll work with any drill.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a real small. Like any drill that looks like it would work, it'll fit.
And what voltage do you want? 18 volt or higher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say 20 or higher.
Especially if you've hard pan or you're dealing with some kind of hard soil issue. Because we were rocking through some hard pan that was, I mean, how many holes do you think you dug of all the holes in that video?
Not that many. I got through maybe like 20, 28 holes
and
maybe.
It sucked 2 batteries dry.
Yeah.
That's how tough it is out there in some of the spots. Pluto said, how are you planning on watering the bulbs you planted since your hard water may damage the leaves and flowers? Drip irrigation. It's the most efficient way we can do anything here. It utilizes far less water, and we can control where it goes. Rose said, is there a reason behind deciding to plant each variety on its own rather than planting a cohesive mix? I cannot wait to see them blooming. You know, I like to see like kind of big drifts of color. I wanted to make sure to plant mine though, and you probably noticed kind of like here and there as more bouquets rather than a big chunk, a big block of color, because I want it to feel more natural out there. I did along the way though, when I got the first area of daffodils done, I thought, oh, I could plant some of my tulips in there and kind of have this, you know, at least they wouldn't be blooming probably together very long, but I would have a wave of color there. And I think in the end, that is the plan. I'm gonna add more varieties into the area. But for now, I just wanted to stretch them out and just get them into as many areas as I could, which if I was to use them all together, I think it would have been far less area. I don't know if that is a good way to explain it. Sometimes I feel
think
like
the whole thing will look good out there.
Yeah, I think it will.
Next spring.
Yeah. You know what though? I was looking, or I don't even know how I came around to see pictures from earlier when we were just planting. What were we planting out there? But it was before the lindens, maybe. Mm-hmm. It was before the grass pathway was there, but I could see kind of where we had been driving in that area to kind of like figure out where we wanted the path, and it looked so bad.
Yeah.
I think all that was out there at that moment was the 3 Spring Grove Arborvitaes and then the main trees that we had planted.
Yeah.
But nothing had really put on much growth, and it was just like white soil and weeds, and it looked horrible.
Yeah.
It looks so much better now. We did a good job, Erin.
Yeah.
And
I think it's just, yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Big time Paul.
Yeah.
But I think it's just going to keep looking better and better.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
A lot better and better.
Yeah. B. Johnson said, I'm really going to show my gardening ignorance here, but I'd like to know if you plant other things on or around where the bulbs are planted. That is not Garden ignorance, because I get that question a lot, and it's a good question. Will any new plantings disturb the bulbs? Probably. How do you avoid doing that? Well, I kind of have a good idea of where things are out there just because we have video proof of it. If I ever wonder, I can look back at a video and be like, okay, we're in a general area. If I disturb some of the bulbs, usually when I'm digging a hole, I use an auger. The augers seem to grab stuff and just like pop it up out of the hole. I rarely damage a bulb. I damage stuff when I use shovels. Because the shovel, there's no mercy. It just goes straight through the bulb. But with the auger, it just throws them out, and I just grab them and pop them back down in the planting hole that I'm digging. You know, so there's like my new root ball of whatever I planted, and then I just tuck that bulb right in the side of that root ball and plant it again.
Do you consider some of the bulbs annuals?
No.
In terms of like the area that they're planted in?
No, because even though like tulips don't naturalize as well, some varieties will, but most of them don't in our area. But I still don't try to think of them as an annual because they will last for several years. They'll peter, you know, and eventually they're kind of like, meh. They're a little sad, you know, but I don't like to treat them as an annual because, you know, I don't know. I just try not to think of them that way. I don't know why. Do you?
Well, I think I would if I had, you know, like let's say I wanted to put a tree right where a grouping of tulips were.
Oh, yeah.
I would just say, you know what, I'm just going to think of this as an annual, and I'm just going to,
yeah.
Like no. I wouldn't worry about, you know, trying to like dig up the bulbs and put them somewhere else. You just like, it is what it is. We're just going to put a tree here.
It depends. It depends on how much I like the bulb. If they're Purissima blonde tulips, I would dig them up and move them. If they're part of a large blend that I've planted, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably treat them as an annual.
Sure.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm okay. Like, you know, some people, we just posted a dahlia video this morning, and I noticed a comment saying, I just treat mine as annuals. I'll give them away if somebody wants them, but I don't want to go through the trouble of storing them because I don't have the right situation. I have a tiny garden, so not that many dahlia tubers, and I like to try new ones every year. Absolutely treat them as an annual. That is totally fine, and you should never feel bad about that. Nope. Becky said, Laura, since you use bulb tone when planting, do you ever go back and use bulb tone or plant tone in the spring on bulbs that are a couple years old as they start coming up? I try to, you know, and I don't know, it's never really at a specific time. It's just usually during when they're trying to soak up energy for the next year's bloom. So usually it's not when they're blooming, it's usually right after they get done blooming and I'm cutting down stalks. I'll try to throw sprinkle some fertilizer around those bulbs. Carson said, does your hard water leaves stain on water bottles and whatever it touches? It creates that white crust. We don't have iron in our water that creates like a red stain, you know, like that reddish orange stain you'll see sometimes. We don't have that issue. I do know that some people in our valley do have that issue. And some people have sulfur. You know that? You know, like some people have like real sulfury water. Ooh, it smells and tastes so bad. Like
it ruins the siding of your house and the sidewalks and everything.
Our water just creates the white crust, which is super annoying, and it will build up on leaves of plants. And if it's an evergreen, it will create a crust so hard eventually that will start to make the plant suffer because it can't soak in the light it needs anymore because it's shrouded by this hard water crust. That's why drip irrigation is also so important for us. SQ said, when all the bulbs bloom next year, spring, can you make an open house so all your favorite viewers can do a cross-country tour visit of your botanical garden in person instead of watching on YouTube? No. We opened up one time for it was a ticketed private tour, and that was a great experience. I would do that again, and we're talking about doing that again possibly, but that's the only circumstance. It would be like a really quick, like 1 or 2 day thing. It would be very limited. Just at this time, that's how we want to do things. So, and I value privacy so much.
You used to value it so much that you didn't like to do. In fact, we didn't do any garden tours in our old property except for at the very end.
Right. And that was like you were pushing for. I'm glad you kind of, like, you didn't force me to do it. You don't force me to do things, but you were like, we got to do it. And I'm glad that you were very insistent. That's the right word. You were insistent about it. But I'm not only private for myself now, but I'm private for my kids now. Yeah. Like, this is our home. And Creative Gardening said, does the auger work best in dry or wet soil? I think it depends on like how wet. I mean, dry soil here is usually pretty hard pan. Ours is. If it's got a little bit of moisture, it's a little easier. If it's wet, that's pretty hard too because it gets really heavy. So slightly moistened soil is the best. And the last video from this week was how I dig and store dahlia tubers. And my process this year is exactly the same as last year. So I tried to do the video a little bit differently, especially for those of you who have been watching our videos through the years. And I know there's a lot of you guys who are new as well, which is great. So we try to include every year when I do something again, like garlic. I think I've planted garlic in a video for 6 or 7 years in a row and showed you how I've done it. But this time, what I did is I sat down, since last year was the first time I did it on a bigger scale, and I wrote down all the steps that we did so that I could provide a list for those of you guys who work really well off of a list, and then I did each step for you, kind of like broke it down that way, and I hope that was helpful. But yeah, got out there, dug some dahlias, and then just walked you through the process. So top comment was from Mrs. Bobber. Laura, you often ask how we can watch videos that are basically repeats of previous year's videos. I think it's because we all love gardening and learning beside you each season. Because of you growing cut flower crops and all I've learned because of you, I'm planning on growing some cut flowers of my own, and it's all because I'm confident in what I've learned from your channel. It's the best start to the day. Thank you for continuing to learn and take us along the ride, even if it's something we have seen before. And then there was a comment after that from Chloe, who said, also, there are those of us who weren't here last year and didn't know she had done a video for it last year. And even the same video over the years is going to change subtly and evolve. You learn new things, adjust your workflow or your space. And I'm almost using Garden Answer as a schedule now. She's about 2 to 3 weeks ahead of me, so I just watch what's going on for garden maintenance, and I can add that to my schedule about 2 weeks later. Nice reminders. That's awesome. That's great. That's a great timing. Yeah. And I'm glad to hear that, because that was one of my whole purposes. I actually called Aaron because I had kind of prepped for the video, and I just called him when I was out there, and I'm like, I think I want to do this more like quicker and more stepped out, and you know, like, what do you think about that? Because we talk about how to do videos style wise. And anyway, yeah, so I don't know where I was going with that, other than the fact that I'm glad that it worked for you guys. TopCat777 said, how do you store your ranunculus corms? The exact same way. Vermiculite and burlap in the same root cellar. Exact same way. Katie said, if in the winter you check your tubers and they seem dry, how do you add moisture? Spray water over the top? Yep, just spray bottle, a little bit of moisture in there, good to go. Michelle said, if you live in a warmer zone, is it okay to just leave them in the ground? This is my first year growing them. Yes, that is something that's kind of big that I didn't mention in that video. If you live in a zone, is it 7 or 8 or above, you don't have to dig your tubers. So hold on, it's just the colder climates. Dahlia growing zone. See, I don't even know, because I know that I have to lift mine. They're hardy in zones 8 through 11. So if you're in a 7, some people say that you can mulch them up really well with leaves and things and protect them, and they will return for you. It's a risk. But for those of us 6 and under, for sure, need to lift them in the winter, otherwise they will die. There are some exceptions. I've had some come back. I used to just plant them in flower beds here and there, and I would never lift them. I just treat them as an annual, but some years they would return.
Well, you know, your zone is an average.
Right,
so
a 10-year average.
If you have a mild year, you know, it's probably pretty easy for us to have a zone 7 year, you know, just a single year.
Well, and it's like one of the last few years, I could have probably left all my tubers out there, mulched them up, and they would have all come back. Think of the work that would save. That would save me so much work, and I would love that. They are just so worth it. And last year I actually considered like just leaving them all and just like adding it into the budget to buy new dahlias and reducing the size of my patch, you know, and just trying out new varieties. And I think that I was speaking off of a heavily pregnant, you know, brain, because I was just in so much pain in the thought of doing that again. But nothing is as hard this year because I'm not pregnant this year with 3 ribs out. Whew.
Maybe we need a dahlia sponsor.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love that. Carla said, where do you buy your dahlia tubers? Several different places. Eden Brothers, I will order some. Florette has sent out quite a number of them. I'm going to order some from Swan Island this year. I think Longfield Gardens you can get some. White Flower Farm. I haven't ordered from them before, but anyway, just like a whole bunch of different people. Yeah.
Because we don't have a sponsor.
Yeah. And Becky said, when should you stop watering the dahlias when you are going to dig the tubers up? Oh, probably a week or so. I don't know. It depends on your moisture level and climate and all of that sort of thing. I could have probably let up water. Well, it's been raining though, so we haven't been watering for the last little bit, but the rain has kept the soil pretty darn moist out there. The flies are just all over in here. They've probably been crawling on my head this whole time. Have you noticed?
I think they probably like the heat
warmth in
there.
here. Maria said you have never featured plant propagation by stem cuttings or division except for succulents and dahlias. I get that you don't need to do this in your current garden with the access you have to new plants, but have you done this in the past? Any advice? I have found that my daylily clumps got so large and crowded that they stopped flowering and I had to divide them to rejuvenate them. Timing spring versus fall is my main concern. Yeah, for things like perennials and ornamental grasses and things, I think early spring is a really good time to divide those. And dividing is always a really good practice. I don't do it a whole lot. I do need to divide our big miscanthus grass out here. It's like, I can't remember.
How many years have you
Cabaret.
needed to divide?
Oh, geez, the whole time we've lived here, I've needed to divide it because ornamental grasses, they kind of they start to die out in the center and form kind of a ring around that main area. And that's when you need to get that thing divided. So that one could stand some dividing. Hostas, I've divided in a video before, actually. I divided some hostas and then perennials in general. As far as propagation via stem cuttings and that sort of thing, I don't do a whole lot of that.
Well, that part is a little, it's tough, and it gets into kind of a gray area because so much of what we plant are like newer varieties of things that are patented. Mm-hmm. And there's no plant police that are going to come and arrest you for
more on a
propagating.
selling. Technically, you're not supposed to do it at all. But I think the only way anybody would get in trouble is if they're propagating by stem cutting or whatever and then selling them. Well, that's the only way that a flag would ever be raised.
Yeah.
Koki said, can we cut them separately before storage? Yes, you can. And I think Florette's got some really good guides. I would definitely recommend going to the Florette website because you can learn all kinds of different things. In fact, you can get the Discovering Dahlias book. I have that book, and there's really good picture instructions and reading that you can do about it. I think you can cut them up and store them the way I have. You can wrap them individually, like in plastic wrap. And you can even write on the plastic wrap with your permanent marker, which is a lot easier to do. And a lot of people do it that way. For me, it's just that I don't know, early spring, I have a little bit more time, it feels like, to get that project done. Right now, we're kind of in the thick of getting as many things planted as we can. We're in the thick of getting decorating done and cleanup. We do a lot of our cleanup in the fall rather than in the spring. So timing for me works better to do the dividing in the spring, and I feel like they have the best chance at survival with me not messing with them too much right now. I just feel like doing that close to planting is the best option for me. Devin said, I'm so curious as to how long this process takes with the amount of dahlias you grow. Yeah, so in that video, I was like, I don't think I have very many more than last year. So last year I did 275. Well, I have 6 rows, 60 feet long. I planted them every foot, so 360 this year.
Whoa.
And I gave a ton away. I did see that question. I don't know if you included that, but I gave a lot of tubers away to friends and family this year. That's where they go, and that's what I'm planning on doing this next year, because I will order some new varieties in to try, and all the extras, I cannot plant that many. Like dahlia production, if you want to get into something that is easy, I don't want to say it's easy, but it kind of is.
Is it legal? Some like the varieties that you're
I don't know
that you're pulling up.
Yeah, maybe that's like the gray area. Maybe don't listen to my advice in that area. But honestly, it is so productive. You plant a grouping of 2 or 3 tubers and you end up with 15 to 20 in a clump. That's crazy, and they're so expensive. So I enjoy being able to give them away. Give them away because I don't need them. And I'm not going to dig a big enough hole to plant that whole clump again. So can you imagine the size of that plant?
Yeah.
It'd be huge.
Now watch some dahlia breeders going to be like, Laura's just...
They can't do that. Yeah. And the last question is, what were to happen if you didn't separate the tubers and planted the entire clump in the spring? You could absolutely do that. You'd have to dig yourself a big old hole. You'd probably have a nice, big, productive plant. And that's it. Anything you want to add? There's nothing new going on.
Nope.
I decided what theme I'm going to do the Hartley Christmas tree in, and I'm excited about it. I was actually dreaming about it last night. First off, I was in bed at midnight looking at ordering ornaments. And then I proceeded to dream about it. And when Samantha woke up to eat, I was kind of like, dang it. Dang it, Samantha. I was having a really good dream. I don't often dream about Christmas trees.
Oh, it's so funny that you dream about ornaments and
I don't
trees.
normally. It was just so on my brain. Anyway, we'll have a video about that here pretty quick.
That's funny.
I'm excited about that. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope it was helpful, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.